Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Priyanka Chandra, Assistant Curator in Bharat Kala Bhavan, a museum of art and archaeology situated in the campus of Banaras Hindu University. Today, we are going to talk on the module Depiction of Women in Indian Miniature Painting under the paper Women, Theatre and Fine Arts. So, after studying this module, you should be able to understand and identify the way of representation of women in miniature painting and women as an artist or an art admirer. In the epistemological framework of total history, women's role and their study mark its turn towards analyzing the true dimensions of gender. The institutionalization of cultural and artistic studies in culmination with feminist scholarship remains an intellectual current that transcends boundaries restricted to one-side perspectives of historical studies. In such an analysis, research interpretations, targets, and discoveries of the representation and identify the women in various realms and structures of the universal entity. The ultimately reflects the shift in new source material and explores art and artifacts which locate meaning in textual and narrative structures that ultimately gives a meaning to the evolution of women in different spheres of history. With this focus, the present chapter analyzes the royal and ordinary women in various realms, like their work involved dress pattern, jewelries, decorations, etc., such as a project and a new enterprises would definitely help to extending the frontiers of historical knowledge by enriching our understanding of women's spheres in various historical processes. Based on this dimension of probing into past of identifying medieval women of medieval India and evolution of miniature painting of these schools and sub-schools of Rajasthani, Kangra, Basauli, Pahadi and Dakkani is undertaken on the basis of classification of various themes. Techniques and styles of paintings were executed by talented artists and painters under the patronage of rulers of Indian kingdoms. The highlights that medieval women are mentioned not only in few literary texts but are depicted in paintings as symbols of beauty, pleasure, and 199 historical identities. The study of these miniature paintings makes it clear that they had always a defined purpose depending on the context in which they were made, and hence an identification of various themes in which they were depicted is a necessary prerequisite of an overall evolution of royal and ordinary women. With this analysis of miniature painting, it is pertinent to understand the importance of women in art history and the role played by women in medieval India. This, in one way, also strengthened the present study of integration of art and women by giving glimpses of various influencing factors on women's life, choice, and role pattern that finally results in approaching women in new trend, fashionable and art historical way. Feminism in the arts grow out of contemporary women's movement in the early 1970s when feminist critics and historians began to question the assumptions which lay behind the masculinistic claim for the universal values of a history of a heroic art, which happened to be produced by men and which had so systematically excluded women production and representation from its mainstream and so proudly transformed the image of women into one possession and consumption. The resulting e-examination of women's life in art proceeded amidst debate about the relationship between gender, culture, and creativity. They questioned the qualities associated with femininity such as decorative, percus, miniatures, sentimental, amateur, etc., that have provided a set of negative characteristics to measure high art. Then onward, investigations were taken up with a desire to reclaim women's histories and to resituate women within the artistic world. This led to an important focus on female representations in art and on the structured knowledge of art history, which has emphasized on the style, dating, authenticity, and rediscovery of forgotten women. Such an approach also defined women's place in art culture. Gradually, this new method of historical and critical evolution of women in art to challenging new interpretations that brought a shift from male oriented to female consciousness, wherein historians of women's studies came forward with new ways of approaching historical material to discover the real place of women in the past and gave a different perspectives of women's history. In this regard, an estimation of miniature painting of different schools may provide an interesting study of how they depicted and lives of different women in the framework of medieval Indian royalty, society, and in totality of history. Such pictorial evidence of women may present a kaleidoscopic picture and an illustrative look of the lives of women in medieval era. An important feature of medieval miniatures of different schools depicting women was the apart from the usual representations of royal women and women as maiden artists and dancers engaged in royal services and entertainment. There are few significant paintings exclusively on other ordinary women. Thus, in totality, the various themes of different schools illustrated the represented royal and ordinary women in various realms. The kingdom represents a colorful history of miniature painting under the artistic patronage of the Mughal and Rajput rulers. Several miniatures illustrating these women and their characters are executed with stylistic trends and technique. A close observation of women in these paintings in Rajasthan school reveals that besides the usual representations of women as royal ladies and women performing variety of tasks at royal court, several new themes and elements were introduced into the paintings seen in the depiction of angels, fairies, and paintings based on the European models like that of Virgin Mary, Holy Family, etc. The pictures of ordinary women were also portrayed with great perfections. The speciality of these miniature paintings is that they depicted just the ordinary women of the society rather than the women of palace life, and these ordinary women are depicted performing various activities that are ordinary in day-to-day life. An indigenous artist who is professional in depicting women in the medieval Indian society most probably illustrated them. Hence, miniature paintings gave equal importance to royal women, with men in their illustrations away from securation and parda system that were very much watched in Muslim tradition. They painted royal women who exercised power in their theme, which resulted in the variety of illustrations of them within royal court, palace, interior and outdoors of the kingdom. Ordinary women too played their part in the kingdoms of medieval India. One more aspect can't be ignored, that women played not only a prominent part of constructional aspects but also in the destruction of politics. Few other ordinary women also played prominent role positively. For instance, Amin Khanan, important officer of Golconda, had three wives, Badi Bibi, Shekhar Bibi, and Seema Bibi, who had soft corner for the poor and distributed milk to the children of the town. Representation of women as royal and maiden. In these miniature paintings, royal patronages as well as ordinary women are shown wearing beautiful red color chakdar jama, having three visible points at the end reaching up to the feet. There is a patka tied over the girdle. The other end, made of zari, also touched to the feet of the lady. Other dress patterns of women being a jacket with lehenga, which is a waist cloth joined at both ends with a band swing at the top through which the cord passes for fastening, or dandinai, which is a large sheet worn over the lehenga, part of which drawn cover the head and other head fastened to the waist. These three garments are necessity, while wealthy wear the other garments made with gold or zari. The ordinary could not offer them. Women are generally depicted wearing zari apron or veil cloth, both in falling over the both shoulders, with floral designed long pyjamas. Altogether, miniature painting represent beautiful flora, leaf, and creeper designs in painted and embroidered type in dress. Trend. General coats were invoiced textile practically for the royalty and wealthy, like wearing a pyjama over which was generally a skirt and above which was a veil, one end tied at the girdle and remaining covering head and the waist and covering the bodies, which was generally the culmination of Hindu and Muslim dress pattern. Hindu women of the society is particularly wore sometimes saris without a bodice, mainly ordinary women, while others wore short bodies, which might be long enough to cover the navel. Among the more affluent classes of society, the sari as well as the bodice had border of varying widths of gold and silver embroidery. Among the Muslim women, the alternative dress was the dupatta of about 4.5 yards, a cloth one end of which was stuck in into the pajama or trouser, which were embroidered and kept in check by girdle with embroidered end. This type of costumes were worn by royal ladies, and these ladies who are attending on the nobles, zinana, and on the courts. Ordinary women generally wore veil and pyjama with bodies. The other speciality of these miniature paintings is that they depicted just the ordinary women of the society rather than the women of the palace life, and these miniature paintings of the time depicted all these textile features with rich coloring elaborating design, and pleasant look both for royal and ordinary women of Golconda and other regions of India. Regarding jewelry pattern, both Hindu and Muslim took pride and felt it as a matter of great privilege in wearing a variety of ornaments in gold, silver, and other precious stones. Even miniature paintings revealed this wealth of jewelry and the variety in them. The women, even men depicted in Tanzore miniature paintings are decorated with gold, precious and semi-precious stones. The luscious pearl, diamond, and jewelry were the privilege of the royal and wealthy people. It should be observed that by the beginning of 17th century, kingdoms of India were very rich. This was due to the active trade of the port along the east coast from iron and cotton goods were shipped to Southeast Asia, while a considerable trade was carried on with Persia, especially in painted cottons, which afterwards gained a high reputation in Western Europe, to which they were brought back by the Dutch and English East India Companies. The discovery of diamond added a further good source of revenue. This wealth was visibly apparent in the gold jewelry worn by women and men, but especially by the dancers and courtesans for whom Golconda was renowned. On the whole, Indian miniature paintings are beautifully depicting royal and ordinary women under various themes, have a peculiar charm in their colors, rhythmic vitality, and in the depiction of beautiful features of women. They convey a convincing image of royal magnificence of the royal women and at the same time illustrate with perfection the talents of the dancers and artists and maidens working in royal household. They also signify the luxury and pleasure of royalty of royal court and palace. In totality, the miniature remains as wealth of artistic sensibility and technical professionalism in history of painting while depicting women. So we can see the image of an idealized woman. The tradition of beauty for women may differ from one culture to another. However, there is no doubt that visual imagery paid homage to the idea of traditional beauty. The stylized Indian woman has come from the Rajasthan tradition, especially a small town of Kishangarh. Raja Sawan Singh fell into love with the beautiful courtesan and created the ideals of womanhood on her beauty. So it is evident that features of the woman known as Banithani were idealized and not based on her realistic face because Banithani is not a name. It is actually means lady of fashion or smart and well dressed. Nevertheless, the stylized features that come from her inspiration are seen as an elongated face, arched embryo, lotus like eyes, sharp nose, and pointed chin, and in and an added flare of the hair curled on her cheek. These all contributed to a specific facial formula. This exaggerated facial type is most often applied to Radha, the consort of God Krishna, and this has become the norms. The Radha and other goddesses were the only named women in imaginary. She also represents an ideal of beauty. Krishna with Radha on a terrace at night belongs to Rajasthan School of Painting 1760. The painting of Krishna with Radha on a terrace at night displays the Rajput traditional adherence to old Indian ideal of physical beauty. This idealized Rajput woman is displayed in profile view wearing the traditional sari decorated extensively with patterns and colors. She is a lighter skin tone, is ornamented in jewelry and has the emphasized facial features. Another convection to note is the use of heavy black line to emphasize the long almond shaped eyes. This heavy line immediately propose the presence of eyeliner, which calls into question the importance of makeup in Indian culture. The presence of ancient eye cosmetic known as kajal was used as an eyeliner. This was a thick black ointment made of antimony sulfide that was believed to be a coolant and protector against the evil eyes. As with all aspects of Rajput aesthetics, it is clear that this tradition of makeup continues from India's oldest caste. The Koli used kajal as a cosmetics. It is noteworthy that even Krishna displayed the idealized facial features that equated beauty in Indian culture, participating in the same tradition, albeit less subjugated than Radha. Women as an artist. There were few female artists that were academically trained or that could make paintings outside the decorative crafts form of art. However, it still holds that European women were granted admittance to the French Royal Academy in the 18th century. Indian women, on the other hand, were kept in an even more constraining ideals of virtue. Judging on the position of elite court women behind the wall of Parda and the emphasis on a patriarchal society, it is reasonable to assume that court painters were dominantly men. The limited visibility of Rajput women prevented them from being represented an image and it also prevented them from being artists, presumably. The representation of women drawing or painting is uncommon. However, it was commonly known that women longing for their absent lover often draw picture of them. This was seen as a lesser genre and portraits they painted or absent lover were for personal use, a craft. Also, these portraits still glorify their male counterparts just as a female artist would be studying old masters and glorifying classical male artists. A folio from Ragmala series, Dhanashri Ragini, belongs to Malwa school 1675 to 1700, showing women as an artist. Dhanashri Ragini is of the only example during this era of a woman showing involved in the arts. Her posture in the traditional Indian artist's style, this gives the connection to the master male painters, as the artist behind this was most likely a male coat painter. Her attendant looks on, holding her paints for her as label guards. Two pupils looked on. However, it is clear that modesty of the Rajput women is in her attendant's ambiguous and seemingly distant stare while label guards' pupils gaze at her canvas directly. Engaged in her emulation, the Rajput woman paints her lover for her own longing. She is not meant to be admired for a talent in the art. Sexual desire and women. So, the male gaze or active male viewing in passive, often native female subjects can be felt in both French and Indian painting. Women are often presented as subject of sexual desire and their male counterparts are often illustrated as untamed animal. Sexual desire is not only specifically a male desire for a female, sexual desire could also refer to a woman's sense of sexual desire. If gazed by the male in innocently radiating sexual desire, then it creates pleasure for the male viewer. On the other hand, if the female's carving off for sexual desire is being assumed that it creates another kind of pleasure for the male viewer as well. While it is unnecessary to classify one pleasure as more wicked than another, the male gaze of the native woman implies a self indulgent pressure that the women does not participate in. The Lady and the Crane, Kullu School, 1700 to 1725, a frequent animal linked with women's sexual desire is the long-necked bird such as the swan, goose, and crane. These are used to illustrate the sexual notions of the simple scene. As noted by W. G. Archer, these elegant birds extend their long necks as if raised in hopeless yearning. As in many other examples, the male gaze of the woman is meant to satisfy the male viewer with the very inference to sexuality. These men's place is perhaps filled by the stretching of the elegant bird's neck. This is a symbol of unfulfilled sexual desire. The classical Indian anthology included many common motifs that were popular with Rajput artists. These generous scenes are subjects that have captured the Indian imagination for millennia. The continuation of traditional ancient Indian themes draw a line of evolution extending through centuries. Traditional Indian yakshis continued to influence image to Indian women seen in The Lady and the Crane. An understanding of the intense value of a woman's moral value for the Indian and Eastern cultures would conclude that these examples, the women are unaware of the sexual objectification that has been placed upon them and thus are seemingly unaware of the male gaze. The native women simply twist at their hair with the presence of the goose or crane as little more than the suggestion of a paternal nature seen around them. Then, unfaithful women. The sexuality of women has been objectified in many motifs in Rajput illustrations. However, the unfaithful women is a theme that is a present but handled quite differently for both. So, Rajput crime passional is a break from traditional court painting. The very severe scene is not one that is depicted often. A husband has returned to his home in a small Rajasthani village to find his unfaithful wife with another man. On the neighbors that stare on, husbands sympathize with the husband's revenge, wife emphasize with the ill-fated victim. The scene is among mortals and is placed in a very realistic setting. Perhaps this is a visual that was meant to teach women proper female behavior because in its severe punishment, it is certain that The woman is not meant to be admired for her affairs. The family unit is successfully depicted in a miniature painting. The role of women as the consort of women, god and kings was a common feature in defining the iconography of women in paintings. The development of the family unit through visual interpretations gave insight into the reflection of a family in society. Women, revered in their beauty and virtue, were ultimately seen in the role of wives and subsequently mothers. It could be understood that all the ideals of their depictions imagery ultimately leads to the importance of their integrity in settled into a family unit. Women shown without morality in both cultures were less likely to find a marriage contract and thus become a burden of their parent. In Rajput culture, scenes of the Holy Family in domestic bliss were a popular theme. In Shiva and his family, Shiva is transformed and humanized from the wild and powerful god into a doting husband and father, though he remains accessories of the divine. Parvati is the consort of Shiva, is perceived as not only his lover but completely as his wife. Good tour like to love scenes of Krishna and his consort Radha, God were often depicted in mortal setting. They, although identified as God, had scene of domesticity, such as Krishna and Radha's romantic encounters, often occupying the same space of mortals. The Holy Family consists of Shiva and Parvati with their son Ganesh and Kartikeya, Skanda. There is no spiritual connection of the garment Shiva sews, implying that it could purely be understood as a display of domesticity. His son Ganesh, the elephant headed god, hangs on the back of Shiva and Parvati participate in swing the garment. It is important to see that Shiva's family include not only Shiva, Parvati and sons but also Shiva's vehicle Nandi and his snakes, Parvati's lion, Kartika's peacock and Ganesha's mouse. These animals were almost always inseparable from them, individually and including them in a domestic scene places them, on some extent, into the role of family pets, just as there are family dogs present in the feet of the husbands in Gru's the beloved mother. The presence of house pet are just as important to the scene of domesticity as the family unit. So, students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. Ultimately, the convictions of the representation of women corresponded in their identities in society as daughter, wives, and mothers, related with their social identities is the portrayal of them as lover, conveying the various phases of femininity, responsibilities of their role compelled men to illustrate their character according to the established morality. Conversely, the illustrations of women in weakness serve their purpose according to the ethics of the culture. A more rigid, practical structure, such as Rajasthan court, use the concept of sexuality according to the ultimate union of the holy that was implied in religious scripture, and the weakness of women was illustrated in the harsh punishment. Thank you.